Howdy, howdy. Zoodevil here, and welcome to our fourth installment of our Essential Units series, exploring the Dwarfs versus Lizardmen matchup. Now, we've looked at infantry and some of the buffs infantry get, as well as the post-Tomb Kings update and what that meant for the Dowie, which was really good. I mean, there was some nerfs in there that were justified, but there was also some very nice buffs, particularly for the Ironbreakers, which is absolutely fantastic. I mean, Ironbreakers are in such a great spot right now. Well, this episode, I really wanted to look at Lords and units specifically against Kroq-Gar while he's on Grimlock. Now, of course, there's Mazdamundi, and he's a popular pick as well because he's fantastic. But I thought I'd pick Kroq-Gar because he's so much more disruptive. When you play against the Lizardmen, Kroq-Gar can go through your lines, and he's going to be less disruptive now that the Dowie have got more mass. But I wanted to take a look at really how dwarf units fare up against Kroq-Gar, and the Lords specifically, and then the infantry units, to see if we can tease out which infantry units or Lords will be the most effective against him specifically. And when you do these types of analysis, like I've gone very deep on this one, and relatively speaking, I only did 5 tests for each matchup, but it's easy to look at a matchup and say, well, because I'm not including Kroq-Gar's specific abilities and his Hand of the God spell, it's not perfect, but you have to pick something to try and isolate some of the aspects, and this is what I did. I picked Kroq-Gar with no abilities. In every single case, he's worth 2,200 gold, and then I put him up against all the Lords and the Thane. I didn't put him up against a Runesmith or a Master Engineer or Clan Angren's Ethereal units. I do know those Ethereal units are actually pretty good against Kroq-Gar, but they can be dumpstered if he does his Hand of the Gods or there's any magic. They're a very high risk reward unit to bring. And I've done the analysis the same way I've done it on, obviously, my previous videos, with the same sort of valuation of looking at the gold spent versus the gold balance at the end of the encounter. So Kroq-Gar's 2,200, our Lord is only 1,000. So basically the way you can think of it is, Kroq-Gar and Grimlock is going to beat the Lord. But if our Lord, for example, reduced Kroq-Gar's hit points by 50% at the end of the encounter, really you're taking 1,100 gold essentially away from the value of that, and then the Lord would have showed a positive plus 100 gold for that encounter, even though he lost. There's something else I want to note as well, and we're going to test my ability to use editing software, but there's a weird animation that Kroq-Gar can get stuck in, and if he gets stuck in that animation, even a Thane can beat him. It's odd, and I will show it. If everything works out, I will show it right now. So what you're looking at here is the animation loop that Kroq-Gar does get stuck in from time to time. Again, not going to happen against a player, but you can see he's just stuck whipping his tail, and we got a dwarf right under that tail, literally kicking his butt. Alright, so hopefully that worked. If it didn't, it didn't. But you'll have seen that it seems like the Dwarf Lords are just short enough that they get in the pocket under Grimlock's tail, and they can just hit him for free until he's dead. And that's why the results you're going to see when we go to the spreadsheet look a little bit odd, but I will point out really what we're looking for when we're trying to evaluate how effective our Lords are. So again, this is heavy spreadsheet work, heavy analysis. If this is not for you, skip to the end, and I'll try and put a summary there so that it makes it pretty straightforward for anyone who wants to kind of get the benefits of this video without having to go through the analysis and spreadsheet work. So we're going to head over to the spreadsheet now and go through every single scenario I tested. I mean, I don't know how many tests I ran, maybe, I don't know, 200, something like that. And it's just, it will give us some pretty decent insight into how everything operates. So we're going to go over there now. Alrighty, so on to the spreadsheet work, which is really allows us to tease out data in a meaningful way and compare one thing to another. And the first example I'm looking at here is the Thane at 650, no abilities, versus Kroq-Gar at 2200. And as always, I take the starting time of the encounter and the finishing time of the encounter so I can look at how long did it take for this to resolve. I look at the starting hit points and finishing hit points of each, measure a DPS, or damage per second, of each unit, and at the end we look at the gold differential, meaning did we pull value out of this or not, and we also look at the gold per minute that we gained, and finally the win-loss ratio. Now, you would think, I mean, the data for all of these Lord battles are very skewed. It's not effective. So I've highlighted the one battle that's worth thinking about, where a player is not going to get stuck in this animation. They're going to be moving Kroq-Gar around constantly, and Kroq-Gar throws every Lord for a loop, with the exception of the Rune Lord, who is on his mount, and Thorgrim, which is on his mount. And we'll see what exactly that does when they don't get tossed around. Like, he'll toss the Thane or Grombrindle or Ungrim halfway across the map. I know they've had their mass increased and they're a little better at handling it, but he completely and utterly dominates them. So what's worth noting here is, the Thane did win one of these. It took 194 seconds and he got stuck in that weird animation loop and actually won. You can see the value he pulled, 1,500 gold, 465 per minute. But this is really not relevant. This is not going to happen in an online battle. What is relevant is the fastest Kroq-Gar beat the Thane was in 26 seconds. It was an absolute destruction. And three out of the 5 encounters, the Thane never even hit him once. He was on his back, being popped around the map, and got absolutely demolished. So lesson learned: unless you have the Tormentor sword or Kroq-Gar is otherwise tied up, keep your Thane the hell away from Kroq-Gar and Grimlock. But unfortunately, this is the story of pretty much every Lord. So we'll go on to just our regular Dwarf Lord versus Kroq-Gar. And these net numbers at the bottom for the gold per minute and gold difference, they're irrelevant. I just put them there so we have the data if you want to have a look at this yourself and try to understand it on a deeper level and do your own sort of analysis or analysis of my analysis. What the key here is your Lord is definitely more robust than the Thane, and the fastest a regular Dwarf Lord lost to Kroq-Gar was in 56 seconds. Generally, pulled some value out of that relative to the Thane, I would say, in terms of gold loss per minute, but just got totally dumpstered, and 56 seconds was the shortest battle. Now we go to our Rune Lord, and this is our Rune Lord on a mount. So the Rune Lord on his mount is not going to get tossed around at all, and the results are much more consistent. You can see that the Rune Lord lost in an average of 46 seconds, the fastest being 33 seconds. And the gold difference was Kroq-Gar, even though he's at 2200 versus 1100, took 708 gold away from us in that encounter at a rate of 934 per minute. That is a unit of Slayers every minute you're losing when you're fighting Kroq-Gar with a Rune Lord. It is astounding how good Kroq-Gar is at dumpstering a Lord, and that's not with anything else. That's just Kroq-Gar. So we'll look at Belegar. Belegar was very interesting, actually. because for whatever reason, Belegar just seemed to get in that pocket very, very easily, and he won 3 of them. They took a long time, but he still, when Kroq-Gar got on him, he dumpstered Belegar, and the fastest he dumpstered him was in 68 seconds. But Belegar did pretty good in general, and it looks like Belegar pulls value in that encounter, but I would say in general that is not the case, because as again, a player is not going to allow Kroq-Gar to sit there and slap his tail for 3 minutes. It's just not going to happen. But Belegar so far is the most robust, I would say. 68 seconds was his fastest loss, as opposed to 56 to the regular Lord. We go on to Ungram. Same sort of story. Ungram won 2, but his fastest loss was in 26 seconds to Kroq-Gar, which was pretty astounding, and turned out to be a lot of gold. He did always get some hits in there, and his DPS was pretty good. I mean, everyone knows Ungram, if he can hit something that's large, he's going to hurt it. He has a big anti-large bonus, and he has good armor piercing. But Kroq-Gar just tosses him around the map, you know, and there's no defense to it. Even if you're standing still and you don't get hit or lose any health, he still tosses you 40 feet, you know. Grombrindle, same story exactly. And Grombrindle lost his shortest one in 34 seconds. He did win 3 of those by getting into that little pocket. And Grombrindle does kill pretty fast when he's killing. He never did hit as high a DPS as Ungram. Ungram hit a height of 63.7 DPS, and Grombrindle maxed at 56.1. So he can't do as much damage as fast as Ungram against Kroq-Gar. That is for sure. There's no doubt about it. But he can lose just about as fast. I mean, the difference between losing your Lord in 26 seconds and losing your Lord in 34 seconds is, in a 5-minute battle, is pretty irrelevant. They're both extremely bad. Now, here's Thorgrim. Now, Thorgrim has the highest health of any Lord. He's on a mount. He's not going to get tossed around. How did he fare? Not real good. Because he's not getting tossed around, Kroq-Gar and Grimlock didn't have to chase him anywhere. They just pounded the snot out of him. The fastest they won was in 29 seconds, which is no difference than Grombrindle losing in 34, Ungram losing in 26, you know, our Rune Lord in 33 seconds, you know, our Thane in 26. I mean, Kroq-Gar is a beast. I mean, I know he's literally a beast, but when he gets on any Dwarf Lord, watch out. The lesson here being is that Dwarf Lords, no matter who you are, can't just face up against Kroq-Gar. If you can get in there with someone like Grombrindle or Ungram, well, especially Ungram, and where Kroq-Gar is engaged with someone else, Ungram is really going to shine. If he can just get free shots, he can do a ton of damage in a very short period of time to Kroq-Gar. And even the battles where he won, you know, 128 seconds. He even beat Kroq-Gar in 88 seconds. Like, Ungram is quite powerful against large foes, and he can do a lot of damage, but he can also get absolutely dumpstered. It's a very high risk reward pick. If you can control him really effectively, let Kroq-Gar get muddled up in something else and just start hitting him without taking any shots in return, Ungram is the Lord to use for that function. There's no doubt about that. So in the analysis and taking a look at this, fundamentally, if Thorgrim's going to lose in 29 seconds and a Thane is losing in 26 seconds, you know, your regular Lord 56, your Rune Lord in 33, you know, Ungram in 26, and Grombrindle in 34 seconds, there's fundamentally no difference between your Lords in how they battle Kroq-Gar one-on-one. So that would lead me to believe that the cheaper the Lord you can get, the better, and keep him the heck away from Kroq-Gar, with the one exception of Ungram, who can really dumpster large foes pretty quickly as long as he can sneak his way in there and not face up against them. So that would tell me, first of all, that our cheap Lords, our Rune Lord and our regular Lord, are really, it it makes them more valuable because the difference between them and more expensive lords isn't as high. So we're going to go take a look at some of the analysis I did late, and I will run a few battles at the end just to kind of demonstrate the power of certain combinations when we get to the end. So after Thorgrim, I wanted to take a look at each dwarf infantry unit versus Kroq-Gar and Grimlock, just to see how they did, and to see if we could tease out some value or tease out spots where a chevron or two or three or four would be really valuable in that encounter. And we've got some really interesting results, but we'll start with the first with miners. I mean everyone understands the miners are going to get absolutely obliterated by Kroq-Gar and Grimlock. There's just no doubt in anyone's mind. But here's the interesting part. The miners lasted for an average of 76 seconds. The weakest unit of infantry the dwarfs have lasted against Kroq-Gar and Grimlock all by themselves. There was no lords around. It was just them and Kroq-Gar for 76 seconds. Compare that to our lords, like Thorgrim at 29 seconds, Grombrindle at 34. Kroq-Gar could beat Thorgrim and Grombrindle together in less time than he can take a group of miners. Now, am I saying bring miners to fight Kroq-Gar? No. They lose gold in that encounter. They will lose at an average of 89 gold, and they're losing at 74 gold a minute. But it's just to really demonstrate, really, ultimately, against Kroq-Gar and Grimlock and the other beasts, we should be looking to our units and our infantry units and other means of combating them rather than our lords, because our lords are demonstrably weaker than even our weakest infantry unit in every way, just about. You know, aside from the fact that, yeah, you can get Ungrim to sneak in behind and get some shots in, he can do really well. But that's really interesting. So we're going to look at every single dwarf infantry unit and see which ones are really good. I mean, I know if you've played the Dowie, you know which ones are going to be exceedingly good, but there's definitely some interesting results to be seen here. So I next look at the miners with blasting charges. Now the blasting charges miners, in the infantry engagement we analyzed in the first installment of Essential Units for the Lizardmen, they're not awful. And they show themselves, again, to be, you know, not awful. They're not better than the miners, though, because Kroq-Gar is pretty immune to their blasting charges. But, you know, if you got to toss a unit in front of Kroq-Gar to slow them down, maybe they might be useful, but we'll take a look at that. Then I looked at the Ekron miners, who were very, very poor in the infantry battle. And again, they actually do better against a single unit, oddly enough. Even though they don't get use of their blasting charges, they do make good use of those stat points. You can see miners lasted 76 seconds, miners with blasting charges 77. I mean, they're fundamentally the same. But the Ekron miners lasted 97 seconds, and that's because of the stat point differences. And they didn't lose nearly as much gold as either of these units. So, not saying they're good or worth taking at all, but they did outperform versus a single target compared to a infantry unit from the Lizardmen in the form of the Saurus Warriors. The next unit are just the regular Dwarf Warriors. This is kind of, is it worth it to get them in front of Kroq-Gar? Will they pull some value? Well, they don't lose as much as the Ekron miners, and they last for 144 seconds. That's over 2 minutes. That's not bad, you know, again, but they're losing gold at a rate of 30 gold per minute. It's not as bad as anyone else, and they do last a lot longer, though I don't, any Lizardman player is going to leave them in an engagement with Dwarf Warriors for any amount of time. They may rear charge them and then go somewhere else, but it's just interesting to know. How did the Dwarf Warriors with great weapons do? We know Dwarf Warriors with great weapons and Longbeards with great weapons do very poorly against Saurus Warriors. How do they do against Kroq-Gar? Well, not too bad at all. They netted a positive 22 gold in that and only lost, when you bring it to a loss, 10 gold per minute. They did a reasonable amount of damage. You know, their average DPS was more than double that of a Dwarf Warrior, and it was higher than the Ekron Miners, who have very good stats at, you know, at 12. You know, you could make an argument that if you wanted to keep one unit of Dwarf Warriors with great weapons in your back line just to muck up and hurt large units, you could make that a argument that if you had 500 gold left, grab a unit of Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, keep them in your back lines for when Krokgar or other large units get in the back, throw them in there, muck them up. They will do some damage. They won't do it super quick, but 76 seconds resolving that. They didn't win any, but they pulled a net positive in the gold equation. So I thought to myself, if the Dwarf Warriors with great weapons are pulling a positive value, very slightly, could we add some chevrons to push that into a solidly into the positive? So one of the things I talked about in my value of chevrons video is that chevrons are a little weird now. They're still valuable, but there are sweet spots, meaning that, you know, three chevrons might be much more expensive per stat point than 5 chevrons or 2 chevrons. You really have to look for the sweet spot, and Dwarf Warriors with great weapons have a sweet spot at plus 5 chevrons. So I ran that encounter to see what the result would be. Well, pretty damn good. They came out to a cost of 622 gold. They still lost everyone, but they pulled positive value in the total gold of a positive 180 gold and a positive value in gold per minute. And that just comes down to the DPS, the damage per second they were doing to Krokgar. The damage per second they were losing was down from 48 to 35. And the average hit points they left Krokgar at was 4,600 as opposed to 5,500. And they stayed in the pocket a lot longer because the chevrons also give them leadership. So instead of routing with an average of 23 hit points left, they routed with an average of 1,488 hit points. So, you know, this is, I don't know when we go and look at the units we have in the backside of this analysis that you would actually do this. But again, if you had a weird number of gold in your build left over and you had 622, you know, a Dwarf Warrior with great weapons with an extra 5 chevrons just wandering around your back line for when those big dinosaurs crash through your front lines is going to pull positive value even when they lose. So that's actually our first little gem, I would say, out of here. All right, so we'll go on to the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. We know they're very good in the infantry engagement. They pull a lot of value. They did take a nerf in the Tomb Kings update, but how do they fare against Krokgar? Well, not awful. I mean, they only lose a total of 15 gold, and they are only losing 22 gold per minute. So they don't have a positive value, but they're not badly negative. And their DPS is only 7.4, but they do take his health down reasonably well, taking him down from 6,500 to 4,900 on average. The encounter lasts a very long time, over 3 minutes. So, you know, they can hold their own by themselves for a fair amount of time. And the hit points they finished with was, you know, an average of 1263. They can succumb to fear and terror. This is one thing that a lot of Dowie units that aren't Longbeards can have trouble with, including Lords being routed off the field. But, you know, what this shows is the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass have value in the infantry engagement, and they are not bad in the monster engagement. They will be essentially a wash, if you will. So that's a positive for the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. So what about Longbeards? How do they fare? Now, here's the big thing Longbeards have, is they're immune to fear and terror. So you see, you know, our Dwarf Warriors with great weapons are routing with 2,300 hit points left, and our Dwarf Warriors with 2,000. They're not fighting to the bitter end because that fear and terror makes them rout. With the Longbeards are having immunity, so we'll see how long they last in the pocket against Krokgar and Grimlock. Well, they do pretty good. You can see their finishing hit points are 811. What a difference. I mean, they do start with better leadership, but the encounter lasts 233 seconds, and they pull a positive gold differential and positive gold per minute. So just your regular Longbeard. Again, no player is going to sit your Kroq-Gar in with Longbeards for 4 minutes. I get it. This is not going to happen, but if you're picking between two units and you just want to bung him up for a little while, Longbeard's not bad. Just to get in his way. Kroq-Gar is not going to do a massive amount of damage to them. I mean, he is going to damage them, but they're going to hit him back as well, even though they're a one-handed unit. So here's Longbeards with great weapons. Now, we know Longbeards with great weapons performed incredibly poorly in the infantry engagement. They are an absolute do not pick choice against the Lizardmen when it comes to infantry. But how do they fare up against Kroq-Gar? Well, not too bad at all. They actually won one of these, interestingly enough. And they really do damage him. They stay in the pocket a very long time. Maybe they're going to win 1 in 10. They won 1 in 5 in this case, but they're pulling like 691 positive gold and 172 gold per minute, which is very, very good for their cost in 750 versus 2200, and that they're beating Kroq-Gar. Even if it's 1 in 10, they're going to pull positive value. And if you look compared to the Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, that's why I said, we're looking at other units that are 622. They pull 180 gold and 42 per minute. They're pulling 690 gold and 172 per minute. So they're quite a bit more valuable than a Dwarf Warrior with great weapons. But like I said, if you get stuck in a funny spot with your gold and you only have 640 left, you can't get a Longbeard or anything, this is an option for your build. So I thought, if Longbeards with great weapons can do this at this level, what are they going to do with some chevrons? So I gave them 4 chevrons, which is a nice sweet spot for them, and that pulls their value up to 880, which is almost that of a Slayer. How do they do there? Well, they basically double their gold gained at 307. They take that win rate from 0.2 to 20% to 80%. They're much more reliable in the pocket. The battle it lasts a little bit less time, but their DPS goes up quite a bit from 17.8, 17.7 to 24.4, and of course Kroq-Gar's DPS goes down because they have better melee defense, and they will last in the pocket quite nicely because their leadership is also increased. But that 880 is putting them right up against a Slayer. So we will kind of see where that goes out. But the next unit we have is our Grumbling Guard, which is our Longbeards with great weapons and the positive aura for, man, why is the word escaping me right now? Vigor, the positive vigor aura. We know they are an absolute essential unit in the infantry engagement. It is a unit that's got to be included, not got to be, that should be included by anybody who wants to win the fight against the Lizardmen. They are truly an essential unit. How do they fare up against Kroq-Gar? Well, pretty darn good. They actually pull more total value than the Longbeards with great weapons at 880. They pull 1,000 gold. They win every time pretty reliably. I mean, they're like, I got down to 1,400. They're going to lose maybe 1 in 20 of these, but they're pulling 360 gold per minute. Very, very good value, and that's on top of their aura, right? They're not buffing anybody with this, so they're a great unit in the infantry engagement, and they're a great unit against Kroq-Gar. The Grumbling Guard was and is an essential unit, and will remain that. They are so strong in this matchup against the Lizardmen. You just can't. You really should always have them. And you can see their DPS. They are definitely stronger than the Longbeards with great weapons that are +4 chevrons. But the Longbeards with great weapons +4 chevrons did get a little less. It's 23.2 versus 22.8. Very, very close. But they really take something that is a good chance you're going to win to something that is a sure thing, essentially. Again, this is without buffs and without healing. I know things change in an actual battle, but we're trying to isolate these things and understand our units at a base level and build up our armies with that knowledge in hand. All right, so how are Slayers going to do? You know, Slayers are the anti-large option. They don't have armor piercing, but we know they perform quite well. So they're at 900, so we really want to compare them to these Longbeards with great weapons at 880. How do they do? So let's take a look. Well, they do pretty damn good. So our Longbeards with great weapons plus 4 chevrons are pulling in 1,000 gold. Our Slayers pull in 1,170. Here's the big difference. These Longbeards with great weapons plus 4 take 222 seconds to kill Kroq-Gar. Our Grumbling Guard 190. Our Slayers 99 seconds. The job is done, and it is pretty reliable. Like, I think Kroq-Gar is going to win 1 in 10 to 1 in 20 of these because they got low a couple of times, but their DPS is excellent. Average of 55. Kroq-Gar does a lot of DPS to them, you know, damage per second. He's at 46.9, but the Slayers hit as high as 72. Now, I thought this is interesting, is I wanted to look for some chevron sweet spots for the Slayers, and I found one. 2 chevrons seems to be one of those sweet spots, and you might not think 2 chevrons really makes a difference, but let's go see. So the next analysis I did were Slayers with plus 2 chevrons. What are the difference? We're looking at, you know, 1170 gold and 734 gold per minute. The Slayers are just unbelievably great, doing exactly what they're meant to do, is to fight large units. Very, very nice. So you can see here, the total gold they pulled was almost the same, even though they cost 72 gold more. Here is the big difference. Instead of pulling 734 gold per minute, they pulled 1,000. Instead of winning that in 99 seconds, they're winning it in 73 seconds. Instead of finishing with 1,900 hit points, they finished with 2,800. They averaged 73 damage per second. Here, their highest was 72. What a difference 2 chevrons make, and this is why it's so important to explore your chevrons in any build you do to see if there is a sweet spot to be found, and there certainly is. So Slayers with plus 2 chevrons, I would say in this matchup are an essential unit. They're only 972 gold, and they are devastating against Kroq-Gar, and they will be devastating against any large unit like Kroxigors, Stegodons, you know, cavalry, cold one riders, horned ones. These plus 2 chevrons really matter. Don't just get Slayers. No matter what, find a way to get 2 chevrons in there, because it is a real nice sweet spot. If you go look at it, maybe we'll go look when we get into the other side if I remember. But Slayers with plus 2 chevrons are worth a lot more than just regular Slayers at 900. The 72 gold is almost irrelevant in the total gold per difference, but you're gaining 300 gold per minute in that encounter, and so it's a very, very significant spot. So here is our very first essential unit against Kroq-Gar, specifically on Grimlock, and that is a Slayer with plus 2 chevrons. There's going to be some other fun ones to look at, and the next one we're going to look at is the Dragonback Slayers. They of course have the ability to make units weak to fire damage, so they could actually work nicely with some of our other units, our Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, or units that do flaming attacks. But the big thing they do is they slow Kroq-Gar or fast units down with that slowing effect. So how do they do where that doesn't matter? They're just fighting Kroq-Gar one-on-one. Pretty damn good is the answer to that. They cost 1150, but they're losing a little bit of total gold in that. So their Slayers with plus 2 chevrons and regular Slayers actually do pull more total value out of the engagement, but they actually have a higher gold per minute. They finish that engagement in 63 seconds as opposed to 73 seconds or 99 with the other 2 versions of our Slayers. They are very reliable in that they finish with 3,400 hit points, so they have half their HP pool left to go and do other things after they've routed Kroq-Gar. They do rout Kroq-Gar pretty fast. So Kroq-Gar here, like, routing mechanics do some funny things with how many hit points units finish with, but they rout him pretty quickly. So he's going to be healthy when he comes back from routing unless you can kill him, which they actually can. If you can get another slow effect on Kroq-Gar, they can keep up with him just fine, or Kroq-Gar gets mucked up by another dwarf unit. So the Dragonbacks are, I would say, another essential unit. So a Slayer with +2 chevrons and the Dragonback Slayer, which you can only get one of. They are extremely good in this encounter, and they have other effects which can synergize with the rest of your army, but particularly can slow down those fast things. So here the two must-haves are, you know, at the very least, one Dragonback Slayer and one Slayer with 2 chevrons in every army that's going to be facing the Lizardmen. I mean, this is just a, and I think most people do bring 2 units of Slayers, and most people do bring the Dragonback Slayers because they've used them a lot and tested them, but most people probably do not add 2 chevrons to the regular Slayers, and this is a big deal, a very big deal. It brings them from the value of a regular Slayer in terms of their damage output to on par with the Dragonback Slayers. It's a really big deal. So that's a first. These Slayers with 2 chevrons again is a real gem, because 2 chevrons are only 72 gold on those Slayers. So wanted to go to Hammers. Now Hammers fared reasonably well in the frontline engagement. I mean, they pull their value in gold. They're pretty good. They're a good unit all around. They may be susceptible to being targeted with spells or other, you know, rear charges or these types of things because they are a high value. But how do they fare up against Kroq-Gar, a big unit like this? Well, not too bad at all. The interesting thing is they win every one, although with their finishing hit points, they finish down at 1882. I could see them losing, but they finish with a fair number of hit points left over. They do 94. They do this in 94 seconds, so it's not as fast as, it's faster than a regular Slayer, not nearly as fast as a Slayer with 2 chevrons or Dragonbacks, but it's not too bad at all. And they pull a lot of gold, the most, 1191 total gold, though they do it at a slower rate at only 858 gold per minute, which is better than a regular Slayer, but not as good as the Slayers with 2 chevrons or the Dragonbacks. So Hammers are a very, very good choice, and I will say that you know, through this analysis, and particularly with the changes in Tomb Kings, Hammers, because they have value in the frontline infantry engagement and against the monstrous unit, really bring up their total value, because they don't have any weakness in those 2 auras. The only weaknesses they're going to have are really against the charge, against cavalry, or these types of things, because they don't have charge defense against large or anything like that. But Hammers are a very, very good unit, and definitely worth considering in this engagement in any build that you do. You know, at least one. You know, you can have none because there's other options, but they hold their own. They do very well in the frontline engagement, and they do very well against the Lizardmen monstrous units, pulling a lot of value out of that. So this is a definite choice to think about, the Hammers. So how do the Peakgate Guard go against Kroq-Gar? Well, they kill him very fast. Battle only takes 62 seconds. It's about the same as the Dragonback Slayers, but they don't pull as much value as the Dragonback Slayers. They're still very good, 949 total gold, so they're not as cost efficient as the regular Hammers, because they start at 1500 gold, but they do pull a little more gold per minute, but not as much as a Slayer. So I'd say Peakgate Guard, they can be crushing against infantry, and they can do very well against large units. I would say this, though, devalues them against the regular Hammers and the Slayers in the back line. And again, your risk goes way up once you start getting into those really high value units, that one of them can get dumpstered somehow or have a spell cast on them, like you know, where it takes a quarter of their health. It's really going to be painful when your unit is 1500. It'll be painful if your unit costs 1100 or 1150, but that's 40% more. So it's significant. So what I'm trying to say is the P-Gate Guard is not an essential unit, but it is an option depending on your tolerance for risk versus reward, because they do have a lot of reward if they're used very well and they're not focused down. They can kill extremely fast on the front line engagement against infantry and in the back line engagement against the monstrous units. So how did our Iron Breakers do? This is what I was very curious, because the Iron Breakers got a big buff in that frontline engagement. They are much better. And the other thing an Iron Breaker brings is that extra mass. They got even more mass than a regular dwarf in the Tomb King's drop. So how did they do with that extra AP? Whew, pretty damn good. So they pulled a total of 1,200 gold, which is the highest so far, better than a hammer, better than anyone else. The problem is the gold per minute. It's only 200 gold per minute. It took them 6 minutes to resolve that engagement. Crockguard couldn't kill them. They finished with about half their health intact, but 6 minutes, very long time. So throwing your Iron Breakers in against any large unit is never going to be a bad choice. You are going to pull value in that engagement. The Lizardmen player is not going to cooperate with that. He's not going to stick Crockguard in against Iron Breakers for 6 minutes. But Iron Breakers pull value on the front line, and they pull value on the rear line, on the back line, but they don't pull a lot of gold per minute. They pull a lot of total value. So where Iron Breakers shine is in those extended encounters, and specifically where they really start to shine is at the end of a battle as opposed to the beginning of a battle, because they just retain their health. They are so hard to kill, and I would almost say one unit of Iron Breakers now is an essential unit. I don't know if I would have 3 on the front line like I showed in one of my other videos for the battles, but having 1 in your front line that you maybe put in the middle of your line and use them in the front line just to hold it, and then as soon as any dinos get into the back, you pull them to the back line just to muck them up and make it so they're hard to move around. I think they're extremely good, and they pull their value. So what about the Norgrimling's Iron Breakers? How do they do? They actually do better. They're worth 1,500, and they pull even more gold. In fact, the most gold, 1,295, almost 1,300 gold, and they're pulling it at 300 gold per minute as opposed to 200. So 50 at a rate of 50% higher than your regular Iron Breakers, and they're left with 6,000 health after they defeat Crockguard. I mean, the Norgrimling's Iron Breakers are extremely good, and they have a massive health pool. They have, like, Crockguard was only doing 9, single digit DPS to them. So they are really fantastic. But again, are they worth that kind of amount of gold? So I would say this is actually this is something that would be an interesting decision. If you were only going to bring 1 Iron Breaker, would you bring the Norgrimlings or the regular Iron Breakers? From this data, it would appear that the Norgrimlings Iron Breakers, and they did quite well in the infantry testing, would actually, even though they're risky, be more valuable than the regular Iron Breaker in that sense. So if you're going to bring 1 unit of Iron Breakers, instead of bringing a base Iron Breaker, it's probably worth it bringing a Norgrimling's Iron Breaker in this encounter. Putting them in your front line, and you can use them to wander around. They have excellent health, very, very good stats, and you put them around the Grumbling Guard so they can stay fresh to the late game, and this is where they're really going to do the job. Because the regular Iron Breakers take 6 minutes, these guys only take 4.5 minutes to kill, or to rout Crockguard. So interesting choices here. You can build, the thing that this is showing is you do definitely have choice in your build. The Norgrimling's Iron Breakers are a valid option, even though they're a little high risk. They are not as high risk as that Peak Gate Guard, I will say. Definitely not as high risk, because they have the health pool and the melee defense and the charge defense against all to handle being charged in the back. They can take a little magic. They can take shots from skirmishers because they have shields. So I would say the Nurgling's Ironbreakers are more valuable than the Peak Gate Guard, and significantly so in the front line and in the back line, because they are very, very strong. So anyways, so I got to the Dragonback Slayers, and really the Dragonback Slayers are, if I look at the Slayers +2 and the Dragonback Slayers, they're very close in their total DPS. The Dragonbacks are a little bit better. I wanted to look at some of the potential combinations with a Dragonback Slayer and a Lord. And so I got the baseline here. This is the same data for the Dragonback Slayers. Their battle time is 63 seconds. The total gold differential is 1,041. They do, 1,000 gold per minute. What happens if I put them with a basic Rune Lord, not mounted, but with Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin? And what happens if I put them with a basic Lord with the +5 melee attack and +6% weapon damage, and embed them inside, embed the Lords inside the unit, so they're going to fight Kroq-Gar 2 with the Dragonback Slayers? What does that look like? So the first test I did was with a Lord, a regular Lord embedded. He's basically dead center of the unit when they fight Kroq-Gar, with +5 melee attack and +6% weapon damage. And I looked at the total cost and the total health pool. So interestingly enough, when you add the cost of these two units together, it's 2308. It's very close to what Kroq-Gar is. And their total health, you add them together, it's 10,000 instead of 6,000. You look at their DPS, they actually get the job done together in 53 seconds. And they still pull the same total value in gold out. But now they're pulling it out at a rate of 1,200 gold per minute. So this would tell me that these two together, even though they cost a lot more, are functioning more effectively than the Dragonback Slayers alone and by themselves. So because they're Dragonback Slayers, basically, let me see, what did they finish with here? 5,000. They finished the 5,700 hit points. Here the Dragonback Slayers are finishing at 3,400. In this case, they might finish with 5,700 or 5,000, because you'll lose some health with your Lord, some with your Dragonback Slayers. Very, very good combination, extremely effective, and the highest total gold per minute. And when I get to the next video, I've already done some private testing on backline units and ranged units and that combination, and you can actually reliably route Kroq-Gar in under 30 seconds if you get the right combination together, and I'll show you how to do that in the next video. But this is really, really good, because you can think of, if you put these two together, your Dragonback Slayers, and you put a Lord right dead center of them, and you group them and lock that group, you can essentially think of it as though the Lord's mount is the Dragonback Slayers, and they are very close to equivalent in their cost at 2,300 gold and 2,200. So I was wondering what happens when you put a Rune Lord in there, and the Rune Lord is on foot, and the only thing he has is the Rune of Wrath and Ruin. Now the Rune of Wrath and Ruin is not in itself going to do a whole lot of damage to Kroq-Gar. It's not. But what it does is it slows him. And when you have the Dragonback Slayer's slow effect and the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, I think his speed is like 9. So he's easy to keep up with both the Rune Lord, and that's for like 25 seconds. He can't run away, and you can just sit there and pound on him. It's way more effective than that Tormentor sword that the Thane gets, because he is slowed for a much longer time, and he's going to just have to sit there and eat it. So it's a very good option. But what do they do as far as total damage? Well, not too bad. They get the job done in 49 seconds. It's which you wouldn't think that at all, because the Rune Lord is not going to do as much damage as the regular Lord, and the Slayers are not going to have as much stats in terms of melee attack and weapon damage. But Kroq-Gar is standing still, so everyone can hit him. It's really neat to watch it, and I'll put one of those battles together for you so you can see it. Now, they don't pull out as much value, even though their total cost is less than that of Kroq-Gar by himself at 2100 versus 2200. Their whole total health is down because a Rune Lord is only got 3200 health. They end at a very high health in general, again, though not as high as the other option. But their gold per minute is extremely good, and they're very, very consistent. You know, they do a very, very good job against Kroq-Gar. And the big advantage of a Rune, so this is actually where I think the choice lies if you're going to put a Lord into your army. I think really you have to think of the Dragonback Slayers and your Lord as one unit, or your Dragonback, or your Lord and, you know, hammers, which is actually lore appropriate that your Lord would be embedded with hammers as one unit. In this matchup, I don't think you should ever have your Lord more than 10 feet away from a unit like hammers or Slayers, for example, or Iron Breakers, because it is a requirement for them to function in the battle effectively, because as soon as Kroq-Gar gets a hold of them, or any of those other big dinos, they can kill them so fast. 30 seconds, they're gone. You know, you get one shot of Rune of Wrath and Ruin, you know, you get 30 seconds of bonus to your melee attack and weapon damage, and then they're gone for the battle, and they're going to hurt your army for the rest of the battle if they're done that way. So really, that's the way you have to think of them, I think, is that they have to be embedded with a unit as though that unit is their mount. Lock them down, make sure they're always together. But the Rune Lord with Rune of Wrath and Ruin does extremely good, and is a very viable choice because they're cheap. They're only 962 gold with a Rune Lord on foot and the Rune of Wrath and Ruin and nothing else. Now, the other option that the Rune Lord has is if you're going to be fighting, you think you're going to be fighting Mazdamundi, or you've had units that have been, you don't like the state that, you know, maybe the meta has lots of magic being used against the Dwarves. You might want to put them on their mount and give the extra 15% magic resistance, I think it is, to your whole army. Maybe that has value. It is hard to say. But a Rune Lord on foot embedded with a unit of Dragonback Slayers or hammers, you know, is going to be relatively effective. You know, and you could do some testing with that. The thing here is, with the Rune of Wrath and Ruin going off and the Dragonback Slayers hitting Kroq-Gar, Kroq-Gar had a speed of like 9. I can't remember exactly what it is. I'll do a quick test battle at the end of this video so that you can see it for yourself, and we'll take that measurement because I can't remember it off the top of my head. So what was I doing here? Okay. So that's it for our Lords against Kroq-Gar. I wanted to do just another quick test with these two Lords because I think you could make a case for Ungrim, most certainly, because if he gets in there and starts hitting a big dino, he can pull a lot of value fast. I'm not saying that Ungrim is not a choice in this. I'm saying that your basic Lords are a pretty positive choice and will pull good value in these encounters for sure. And Ungrim would be the only other choice that I would pick. Where Ungrim tends to be a little weaker is he can't buff your other troops the same way. That so your Lord has a constant buff he can get a constant buff of +5 melee attack and 6% weapon damage wherever he goes. Like on the Peak Gate Guard, that's going to be ridiculous. On any of your units, it's going to be positive. And your Rune Lord with his Rune of Wrath and Ruin, if he can get that off 3 times, he's pulled all of his value at 962 already. And he can keep using it in long atrocious battles over and over to either slow down a unit or really, really hurt or decimate an expensive infantry unit. Let's say they bring Temple Guard for some reason. You pop a Rune of Wrath and Ruin on them, and they're going to be down 25% health before they even hit your front line. So they have advantages to the rest of your army, whereas Ungrim does have a very specific advantage, and that is against large units that will be present in your back line. It's definitely a choice. But I wanted to look at these two lords up with a different unit up against a group of Saurus warriors with shields. Is there a difference in value? Can we see any difference in that encounter? So what I did is I looked at a Rune Lord with Rune of Wrath and Ruin first, with up against the Saurus warriors with shields who cost 800. You know, this is still their total cost. How long does the battle take? And they're embedded with a group of Grumbling Guard. So they're inside that unit, and they're fighting hand to hand against these Saurus warriors with shields and using the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and the Grumbling Guard are also fighting the Saurus warriors with shields. So the battle takes 109 seconds on average. They win every one, of course, we would expect that, but they pull 140 gold out of that encounter at a rate of 77 gold per minute. And I wanted to compare the Rune Lord to the Lord with +5 melee attack and 6% weapon damage in that same scenario, just out of curiosity. And how do they do? Well, actually, your regular Lord does a little bit better. Getting that done in 97 seconds instead of 109 seconds, pulling a total of 157 gold as opposed to 140, even though they're more expensive off the bat, and pulling out at a rate of 105 gold per minute. So your Rune Lord with Rune of Wrath and Ruin, or your regular Lord with +5 melee attack or 6% weapon damage, embedded against with Dragonback Slayers against the big backline units, or embedded in the front line, are both pulling good value for sure in those encounters. So that's the analysis portion of the video. So we will now go back and maybe do a couple test battles just out of interest's sake, or maybe we'll just do one just to show how things line up. So we'll go there now. Alrighty, so just to reiterate, the units that we're looking at, really the units that are, I will say, the essential units, are these first three. Your Slayers with 2 chevrons, and you'll notice actually your 2 chevron Slayers are 40. Let's see, you go from 38 and 32 to 39, 40 and 35. So they get a very nice boost compared to Dragonback Slayers. Dragonback Slayers have 10 extra melee attack and 3 less melee defense. The weapon strength remains the same, and the charge bonus they get is a little bit higher. And of course, they do that minus 36% speed. So really, Dragonback Slayers, regular Slayers with 2 chevrons, your Grumbling Guard are also an essential unit. Now these units, your other units that are very, very good in this encounter, I would say Ironbreakers, maybe not so much of an essential unit, but they're very good. But certainly your Hammers do very good in the front lines, and your Ironbreakers do good in the front lines too. Now this is really where you're going to get into a lot of choice. These 3 units should absolutely be in your army every time, no matter what. These ones are you're going to start to have a lot more choice. Do you want to go cheaper than the Hammers, or do you want to use the Ironbreakers, or do you want to use those Norgrimling's Ironbreakers? Your choice on how you want to build your army, really, depending on what you want to do. So what I want to do is, we have Kroq-Gar here, and are we on the right? So we are on Glacial Lake, we are the defenders, good. Let's put in here a Rune Lord, okay. And we're going to get rid of all of his abilities, with the exception of Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, which is minus 48% speed, and the Master Rune of Negation. We're not going to have any of this. So he's 962, and we're just going to embed him in the Dragonback Slayers. So that's the matchup, and this matchup, he's worth 2200. These guys are 88 gold cheaper when put together. So let's go and just see how that plays out. And I'll just show you the concept. I mean, you just put them right in the middle, and we'll see what Kroq-Gar's speed is, because I never looked at it precise. I did take a peek at it, but I didn't write it down or think about it. So really we're putting these guys here, we're putting him right in the middle, group them, lock them. So now that they're one unit, it's like you got to think of these guys like they're his mount almost. So we'll start that battle. Okay, now you can see we're at 59:43, so we're still 43 seconds, and when the engagement begins, I'm just going to make sure they're fighting, and I'm going to make sure we get Rune of Wrath and Ruin, Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin on him, and we'll hit play, and I'll make sure he goes and fights. So we'll get, so see how far he can knock him back. It's just ridiculous. So Kroq-Gar is at speed 8, so he can't just wander around your back line and do whatever he wants, and your Slayers can just wreck him. He can move so slow. He's at speed of 8, and it looks like he's got he's already got where is it, cold-blooded on, so minus 24% speed. Well, I guess his speed would be not 8, it would probably be around 16, but all your units can keep up with him is the point, and they can get the job done very, very quickly. So let's see here, been mucking about. Alright, and they got him. So 58:05. I don't know exactly what time. That seemed to take longer than it normally does, because they only have 2,500 HP left and 2,929, so that might have been an outlier. But you're going to be able to win that pretty reliably. Well, not pretty reliably, every single time with a one-on-one like that. But we know Kroq-Gar does get healing from the Revivification Crystal, and there are other things he can do. He's not going to just sit in the pocket, but this is an extremely good combo. And again, he's at 48 speed with just the Dragonback Slayers and not the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin. Where is it? Come on, show it to me. For some reason it's not, yeah, it's just minus 36% speed. So that's a very, very good way to put your units together. And again, you think for a while there Kroq-Gar had 9 speed, but with these two debuffs on him, he's going to be, I think normally he has, if he has, let's go back to end the battle. We'll look at his normal speed. Continue. Kroq-Gar normally he has 75 speed, so he gets 50% off of that. He's already in the range where your Slayers can catch and keep up with him. But the big thing is, with that combination, at bringing him down to a very low speed, like even if it's 20, what he's not going to be able to do is get into your back line. And boy, oh boy, do the Dawi have backline options when it comes to taking out big units. And we're talking Rangers with great weapons. I mean, even Quarrelers can do the job. Thunders, Uthar's Raiders, and now the Iron Drakes, which are 100 cheaper than they used to be, and even our artillery can do a job on him if he's still. Okay, I'm just going to cut this into the video because I forgot to put it in there, and it's 2 more battles that I think you'll find interesting. And one is our regular Lord with just this ability here, Banner of Lost Holds, and we'll go and do that fight, and then I'll put Ungrim in. But I'm going to do Ungrim a little bit differently just for fun. So we'll start that battle, and you can see how these 2 units perform against Kroq-Gar together, and then we'll take a look at Ungrim, who is a definite option for your Lord in this battle. So we'll put him in there, we'll group them, and I'm just going to actually put him near the back just so he doesn't get popped out 50 feet, and we will put them up there, and we're going to start that battle. So we'll just see how fast the battle resolves. Yeah, he didn't get popped out. Okay, I just want to make sure they stay attacking. Whoops. That was a mistake. And you can see they really draw him down. That's that animation he gets stuck in. But away he goes. You know, in just over a minute. So we'll end that battle. And we'll look at now Ungram in that same configuration, which is the configuration I would put him in, something like that with another unit, so it's not easy for him to get charged down. So where are you, Ungram? Okay. And we're just going to use this one, which is armor piercing and 20%, and we'll use his Axe of Dargo. I mean, that makes him quite a bit more expensive, but again, this is all about having fun, and we'll see how fast Ungram can help tear down Kroq-Gar with those two abilities running, and of course the Dragonback Slayer is involved. So we're going to put Ungram right here in the middle, group them together, and we will start the battle. And I'll pop these two abilities when he gets close, and we'll see. Oh, I didn't lock him. Crap. Whatever. So now we're going to pop these two abilities for Ungram and make sure he's attacking and make sure he's attacking, and we'll just run it really quickly. And you can see Kroq-Gar is just getting absolutely dumpstered, and he's gone in less than a minute. So Ungram with these two abilities going, that plus 40% armor piercing and plus 32 bonus versus large with the Axe of Dargo, and his Deadly Onslaught, which you could or couldn't use, but with Ungram it's actually a very, very good ability because it gives charge bonus, and his charge bonus is already good, but we're up to 68, 630 weapon damage, and you can see they can dumpster Kroq-Gar extremely fast. So okay, we'll cut back to the last part of the video, and hopefully you also found these two encounters interesting. But that'll be for the next video. We're going to look at the backline units, where they excel, which units are really good and why, and we're going to do some analysis on artillery and this sort of thing. So that'll be it for this video. I hope that you've found it interesting, you've taken out some value in it, and that you can use it in your online battles or building your armies as a useful bit. And if you found it interesting, comment down below, or if you have any other thoughts on the analysis or options that you found to be really effective, please add them to the comments. If this is the type of thing you like, definitely subscribe. I love actually getting the little dings on my phone when I get a new subscriber. It always makes me happy, and it's very motivating. And of course, you know, hit like and let me know that you do like this type of analysis. This analysis is not for everyone. I get it. You know, a lot of people don't want to look at any analysis, or they want their analysis to be a simple, you know, 2-minute put this unit against that unit without going in depth and looking at the numbers in a very I don't want to say tedious way, but a very in-depth way, really trying to see, can we tease out something in the numbers and find those little sweet spots like Slayers with 2 chevrons, which is a fantastic little find, I think, personally, for your army, because it's going to make your army, where you had Slayers anyways, that much better in all their encounters. So again, hope you like it. Hope you leave some comments in the bottom, and I will see you soon. Have a good one.